Do you want more book recommendations, great things to read? I mean, come on, who doesn't? You're in the right place if that's what you're looking for, because I'm here to share the next 20 favorite science fiction and fantasy reads from 45 different content creators, booktubers, bloggers, authors. Being part two of this series, you can count on these books to be even stronger recommendations than the first 20. And if you didn't check those, go back and watch that episode. But come on, let's get to this next part of the list. Hey, glad to have you here. This is Fantasy for the Ages. I'm Jim, the father of this show. I do this with my son Zach, who's not here today. I'm taking care of this list, facilitating the top 80 favorite science fiction and fantasy books of 45 different content creators that are out here online in the fandom. Whether doing book blogs, YouTube channels, podcasts, or even a few authors that we know and love. I already did the first 20 of this list, starting at 80 and working up to 61. Today, I get to start at 60 and go all the way up to 41, and I'm excited to share these with you. Now, none of these books are my recommendations. It's 45 other people. I just threw the question out there and they responded, and it was fantastic. Now, some of these books I hadn't read. They're now on my TBR because I'm going to take good recommendations. I've got more stuff to read now. I know my TBR is getting really, really long, but hey, so what? It's still good stuff waiting for me. Just like with the first episode, each of today's 20 books only had one content creator recommend each of them. They're all on here because somebody of these 45 included each of these books in their list of top 3 current favorites. How do I rank them? Well, again, I went to Goodreads then. With all of these that only have one recommendation, what does the fandom think? And based on all the votes and reviews and quantity of ratings and reviews, I was able to put them in an order that makes a lot of sense. And I think you'll appreciate the way they come out on this list. As with last episode, stick around at the end as I shout out some of these contributing content creators that help make this episode possible. Today I'll highlight 12 of them. These aren't the only ones who contributed books on today's list. In fact, some of them, their recommendations might not be today at all. They're just another quarter of the people who responded. And thank you to those of you who did. Now, before I share numbers 41 to 60, one more comment. As I said, my favorites were not added to this list. My son's favorites aren't included here either. But dang, there are books being mentioned today that we are all in for. And that honestly, I'm shocked only one person recommended as a favorite. These are great books. I'll point those out as I work through the list. I might think they should be higher, but I am just glad they're on the list because there's a lot of great books that you're now finding here. Okay, let's go with the list today. Starting at number 60, The Axe of Cain by Matthew Stover. All right, we start right out with one of these that's way too far down the list. And this is Chronic. Stover's classic books here do not get the recognition they deserve. Not enough people talk about them. I just finished them, so I'm a little high on it right now, but these blew my mind. They were so good. If I was a cheating man, lacking integrity, I would have just slid them up the list anyway because they deserve it. But dang it, integrity. Yeah. These books were written 1998 through 2012. Now, that alone is impressive. We're talking a 14-year span, but it's 4 books that are so incredibly interwoven. I'm like, how did he pull that off without writing them like 3-4 years in a row? It's very impressive writing. Gritty, dark fantasy with strong sci-fi leanings are involved. I thoroughly enjoyed them. The only thing I'd say to anybody is if offensive language gets to you, oh, there's plenty of it in here, so be aware. So good. Number 59, The War Child series by Karen Loeche. Written from 2002 over 2005. This YA sci-fi fantasy series, it's a trilogy, has space opera leanings for sure. There are rumors that more books will come, but they mostly appear to just be the wishes of the fans. We haven't had another one since 2005. I think it's a trilogy. I think it's done. Number 58, The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. 4 books. I mean, that's what quartet means, 4. Written from 2006 through 2009. This is epic high fantasy with all the standard concepts on display. Magic, huge stakes, incredibly hard to pronounce names. It looks like fun. Number 57, The Oxford Time Travel series by Connie Willis. These are award-winning books, 4 of them in the series, plus some novellas. The first book came out in 1992. The final 2 books, which really are just one large book in 2 parts, came out in 2010. This is a blend of science fiction fantasy and historical fiction. And these are already high on my TBR. I really look forward to getting to them. They sound fascinating. Number 56, The Second Apocalypse by R. Scott Bakker. This is a 7-book series that really merges 2 related sets. First, the Prince of Nothing trilogy, and then the Aspect Emperor Quartet. They came out starting in 2003 and finishing up in 2017. Dark epic fantasy. There's a lot of darkness showing up here in the series today, and this is part of our list. This does actually look like my kind of thing. I mean, just having the word apocalypse in it kind of piques my interest. It's been placed in my TBR. I didn't have my eyes on it before. I can tell you I didn't put it very far down because, apocalypse. Number 55, The Graven by Essa Hansen. This trilogy was published from 2020 to 2023, so fairly swiftly, right over some sort of pandemic that was happening in there. It's a sci-fi space opera. Looks pretty high on the adrenaline as a read. It's recommended in the reviews as something fans of The Expanse would enjoy. Ooh, I like The Expanse. I might have to check it out. Number 54, The World of Warcraft novels, written by multiple authors over many years. There's 36 novels that I could find. The first one came out in 2000, the last one in 2022. There could be more someday. These are all built upon the world that was created for the immersive video game. Kind of the first huge, massive online game where people were playing with other people all over the world, not just playing one set game, but roaming and exploring adventures in this amazing, incredibly huge world out there with humans and orcs and other kinds of magical creatures. The books mirror the kind of world then that you get in the game, sword and sorcery fantasy. And it's just a ripping good time. These books aren't particularly deep necessarily, but they're good. They're entertaining. Any fantasy fan should find things in there that you'll enjoy. Number 53, kind of similar but a little older in its originality, is the Dragonlance novels, also written by multiple authors. There are nearly 200 books now under the Dragonlance banner, with the most recent set, a trilogy, about to finish. I think the last book comes out in just a few weeks. This was begun in 1984 by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, and many other authors have gone on to be involved over the years. That trilogy that's about to finish, that's Weiss and Hickman again, coming back and writing some more Dragonlance. This is classic sword and sorcery fantasy, straight out of the worlds of old school Dungeons and Dragons. It's a happy place for me anytime I dip into the Dragonlance novels. Number 52, the Imperial Ratch or Rach trilogy. I mean, Radch. We don't have words like that in English, so I'm not sure how to say it. It's written by Anne Leckie. This is an award-winning science fiction trilogy with a touch of space opera flair. It was published over 3 years, 2013 to 2015. Now, in 2023, one of the best books that made the biggest buzz was Transition State. And that's a standalone novel by Anne Leckie set in the same universe as this trilogy that had come out, a decade earlier. Might be good stuff. And again, if you're a sci-fi fan, take a look at it. Number 51, The Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. Here we got some old school classic stuff. 5 books that started in 1964 and finished in 1968. This is middle school classic fantasy. Book 2, The Black Cauldron, was the basis of the Disney animated movie back in 1985. Has a very different feel from the other animated things Disney put out. For some people, it's their absolute favorite. I always found it a little weird, but I definitely love the strong fantasy leanings in that movie. And that's coming straight out of the books. All right, that's the first 10 for today. Let's move on to the other 10. Number 50 is the Hanged God trilogy by, apologies if I get the name wrong, Thild Cold Holt. High fantasy, making use of Norse mythology. Written from 2020 to 2022, so 3 books, 3 years. I'm told this has a very authentic historical feel, rich in Norse history and mythology, but making it its own. If you're into those kinds of novels, this is one to check out. Number 49, Night Angel by Brent Weeks. There are 4 Night Angel books out now. First, there was an original trilogy, all published in the same year, 2008. And then there's a sequel series, which we think is going to be another trilogy. And just the first book of it is out, Night Angel Nemesis. That came out last year, 2023. So there was a bit of a gap as the fans of Night Angel trilogy were like, come on, Brent Weeks, bring us back into this world. Give us some more. Well, I read and loved the original trilogy. So I was definitely one of those going, hey, we'd love more in this world, more about the Night Angel. Come on. Night Angel Nemesis, it's got possibilities. It's given us some stuff to chew on to start off a new series. But I found the book to be rather bloated. It really could have benefited, I think, from being edited down. I've got content just on that book. But the story within the novel, it's aging well in my memories, and I'm definitely looking forward to reading more of this new series. Number 48, The Culture series by Ian Banks. This already was waiting on my TBR, though admittedly down a ways. Because it's made this list, I've moved it up a little more. That's what I do with my TBR. I move things up, I move things down. This is a 9-book series plus a short story collection, so you'll often see 10 listed like in my graphic here. It's science fiction fantasy with hints of space opera. 1987 is when the first book came out, and it finished up in 2021, so it spanned a healthy dose of years. Number 47, The Old Kingdom series by Garth Nix. 5 books, all young adult high fantasy. Started out in 1995, didn't finish until 2016. Zach read these when he was younger, and they still sit on shelves here in my house. He enjoyed them, recommends them to me, so they're on my TBR already and not too far down the list. I will probably get to them next year unless I read faster than I expect. Number 46, The Great Library series by Rachel Kane. This is young adult dystopian sci-fi fantasy. Written in 2015 and finishing in 2019. So 5 years, 5 books. What happens when no one is allowed to own books anymore? You get this series. That's about all I know of it, but it does look interesting, and it's another one I had to add to my TBR because I'd never heard of it before. Number 45 is something I'd definitely heard of before, The Harper Hall of Pern by Anne McCaffrey. This is part of the beginning of the Dragon Riders of Pern series. Dragon Riders of Pern starts with 2 trilogies that kind of are woven together. So this is one of those trilogies. The series is science fiction that feels a lot like fantasy, but it's science fiction. Anne McCaffrey was a science fiction author, and this really is science fiction. Don't let the fact that there are dragons in it confuse you. Now, the Harper Hall of Pern, oh, there's still dragons. This was my first exposure to the Dragon Riders of Pern series, but way back when I was a teenager. If you remember the science fiction book club, I joined it and got this as a one set, the Harper Hall of Pern book. 3 for 1 is the way my cheap teenage mind was thinking. But oh man, it was awesome. And I fell in love with this series, right? With this books. These particular ones are written from 1976 to 1979. The Pern series itself started just a little before that. And in theory, it's still going. Anne McCaffrey has passed away, but she has 2 children who have contributed additional novels, and they could always write more. Number 44, The Chronicles of Amber by Roger Zelazny. Now, this one's funny for me that it's right here next to the Harper Hall of Pern, because in that same first science fiction book club score I also got The Chronicles of Amber in a 2-volume set. Now, those were actually just the first 5 books of the Chronicles of Amber. Now you can buy 10 books all in one big Great Book of Amber. Back then, there were only 5 available. But then Roger Zelazny started writing the second 5 just after I bought the first 5. This is one of the earliest fantasy works that I ever read. It feels like the first truly adult fantasy, epic fantasy that I read. And it is definitely epic fantasy, but it's got a different sort of spin, blending many fantasy elements with more modern day vibes, even though it's written back in the 70s. So the 70s modern day. Although the second set started in 1985 and didn't get finished until 1991, so many people find that a little more relevant because it's not quite as far back. I have now read, of course, all 10 of these. I enjoy them. Glad to see them on this list. Number 43, The Devoured Worlds by Megan E. O'Keefe. This is space opera fantasy that leans into romantasy. There are 3 books written over 2023 and 2024, so very recent. It's a completed trilogy, but there are not many reviews for that last book in the trilogy because literally it just came out last month. It finished in June here of 2024. Number 42, The Between Earth and Sky trilogy by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is science fiction fantasy that's inspired by pre-Columbian American civilization. It's an award-winning series, including for its LGBTQ aspects. 2020 is when the first book came out, and then it wrapped up in 2024, so it is a concluded series now. You might want to check it out. And we'll finish today with number 41, The Adan trilogy by Philip Chase. This is high in my TBR. I'm definitely hoping to read it before the end of the year. Now, all 3 books came out in 2023, so this is very current, very recent fantasy. And it made quite a buzz when it hit in the circles that I interact with. I mean, it's like everybody was talking about the Adan trilogy and wanting to read the Adan trilogy. And I'm like, I'm busy reading other things. Philip is someone that I've gotten a chance to know through interacting on Twitter, just chit-chatting here and there. I got a chance to know. Sounds like we're best buds and have had a beer. That's not true at all, but we've interacted multiple times. He seems like a really nice guy. He is one of the 45 people who has contributed to this list, but he did not shamelessly submit his own book series. Somebody did that for him because people love it. Epic fantasy trilogy that I'm really looking forward to reading, and I don't know exactly when I'll get to it, but I am hoping before December finishes. Okay, that's our list for today. As I said early in the episode, I'm going to share more content creators who contributed here. So here's 12 more who provided books for this list. Some of them were featured today, those books. Some of their books are in other episodes on the list. Be sure to check out the content from these great people. We've got the Blood and Ashes podcast, Colin's Corner YouTube channel, Cool Story Wheel of Time podcast, Darko at Kindles and Kicks YouTube channel, The Dublin Book Review, Jody at Witty and Sarcastic Book Club, Jonathan Cohn and his YouTube channel, Josh at the Red Fury Books YouTube channel, Livia J. Elliott, author and host of Books Undone podcast, Matt Pittman at Go Read Books YouTube channel, Nico's Book Reviews YouTube channel, and finally, Philip Chase, author of the Adon trilogy. Links to where you can find each person's content is in the show notes down below. Check out their channels, websites, and or fictional content. While you're looking down there, there's a comment box. You want to say anything about the list that was shared today, that's your spot. I read all comments and respond. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.